You're an expert on medieval history. I'm my own sort of expert on medieval history because, as you can see behind me, I'm a big fan of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And that's basically the same thing as what you did. So,
Yeah.
I've
The,
watched it
the
enough.
holy hand grenade of Antioch was I took a whole graduate class in that. So I mean we read Chronicles. That is the holy Fabergé egg
Yeah.
of Antioch without the cross pin.
Well, I
And
didn't want to scare. I
that
didn't
was a
want to
great
scare
one.
anybody. Hey, welcome to Anti-Social Studies and another edition of my new series, Emily Learns About. I'm Emily Glinkler. I'm a history teacher, and today I have John Moscatiello.
It's Italian. It doesn't Moscatello. The I is
Moscatello.
silent.
He is the founder of Marco Learning and also is just like a history nerd like me. So, John, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you're going to teach me about today.
Yeah, Emily, it's great to see you. I am the founder of Marco Learning and by day and medievalist by night. My training is in the history of medieval Spain. I did my undergraduate degree at NYU in Spanish literature. So I have some of my backgrounds in literature. And then my graduate degrees from Fordham and Notre Dame are in pure, good old fashioned medieval history. So I lived in Europe for a year as a Fulbright scholar. I published academic work in Spanish and in English. And I love this stuff. I'm so glad we're talking about Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Like once every 3 years, my medieval other alter identity like has something that's like relevant and interesting, and this is that moment. So I'm cherishing this like the little
Oh, it's
pearl
so
that it
rare. I
is.
mean, we've talked about this before, but I, in grad school, studied like the interactions between Hernan Cortez and Montezuma, and the amount of times I get to use that knowledge is so few. So I'm always so excited. Yeah, I mean, legitimately, my knowledge of the Middle Ages, I think, is like a lot of people's knowledge of the Middle Ages, which is it mostly comes from movies and books and like stories,
Yeah.
and it doesn't actually come from real facts. And so I am excited because I do love that movie. I do know that Monty Python, they're very smart. And so I think that they know a lot more about the Middle Ages. But my concern is that people like me and my students who have to watch this movie every year, they then think that's really what it was like. And so we're going to do this in 3 parts. Part 1, we're going to get to torture. We're going to get to the church and monks banging their heads and whatever. But first, we wanted to talk just generally about like the philosophy of the Middle Ages, like it being referred to as the Dark Ages, and whether or not that's actually, like, were they dark? How dark were they?
Yeah. That's a great, it's funny that you started with what you know about the Middle Ages comes from Monty Python and a couple of other things. When I got to college and I took my first medieval class, I thought, this is stupid. I don't want to take this. The Middle Ages are gross. I
Everyone
once was
smells.
in the and everyone did smell. It's a true story. But I was in high school. I went to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and I was in the medieval art section, and I just got legitimately creeped out. Like all these rooms, all this blood, and like it had no reference point to my life whatsoever. And so the Middle Ages has that really interesting thing where it is completely different from the modern world I come from, but a lot of the stuff I have in the modern world comes from the Middle Ages. It's both studying something different from you and studying yourself. Like, for example, the Middle Ages invented the university. It invented the English language. It invented the book, lowercase letters, and punctuation marks.
Wait, hold on.
So,
Lowercase letters?
yes, in the ancient world, if you look at ancient Roman inscriptions and texts, it's just a pile of capital letters, no punctuation marks. So every semicolon, every time you use one, you shouldn't use them that much. You should thank a medieval monk. There's so many things that you pick up and put down in one day that have their origins in this, not 5,000 years ago, but actually 800 years ago.
Well, as you were talking, it made me think, like, we learn so much about Greece and Rome, and we like to talk about how we get so much from Greece and Rome, and I'm always kind of like, do we? Like, okay, democracy and republic, but otherwise, I'm like, do we really? Like, our buildings look like theirs. And really, it's funny that, like, what you're saying is we probably should spend just as much or more time on the Middle Ages, but it seems dark and gross and dirty and boring. And I also think, and this is what I want you to talk to me about, because I think it's a conspiracy from the Enlightenment, right? Where they want us to go back to Greece and Rome, which was this bright, shiny, classical age that they're trying to do again. And they kind of just want us to ignore the so-called Dark Ages in between.
Yeah, so the conspiracy is even vaster still, right? There's three vast early modern conspiracies converging at once. One is the Renaissance, where art in the Middle Ages is crappy, and so we need to go back to ancient Greece and Rome when art was real. Art in the Middle Ages is exquisitely beautiful in breathtaking ways. A few examples would be the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. You can go there today and see the Dieses mosaic, beautiful pieces of chipped glass and gold that will just absolutely take your breath away. The Sainte Chapelle chapel near Notre Dame in Paris, where you see stained glass windows, 1,000 stained glass windows. They've recently restored it, recounting the entire Bible in blue and red and yellow. They had tooled leather works. The best books ever made in terms of book production were made in the Middle Ages. But the painting was kind of garbage, and they didn't have single point perspective.
No.
So everyone's arms are a little
there's
like coming out of their ear.
There's like flat man babies is what I call them. Like all the baby Jesuses just look like they took a man and then went shrink and just made him into a little man baby. And their skin's always a little gray. I always show that to my kids. I will say I play into that because I only show them paintings. You're bringing up a good point. I really should be showing them more than just paintings, because I'll show them that and then I'll show them like Renaissance paintings that are like, oh my god, they were idiots in the Middle Ages. So that's probably not great.
It's the painting and sculpture was not doing well in the Middle Ages. You see these extremely stiff, flat, distorted, not realistic people, assuming that realism is the goal of art. So the Renaissance had rediscovered those technologies and rightly looked down the Middle Ages for lacking the kind of character of ancient Greek and Roman art.
But you said something really interesting, which is that like assuming realism is the goal of art. Like I think what I wanted to talk to you about, or what we wanted to talk about, is that from a modern perspective, the Middle Ages are like gross, but it's because we're coming at it assuming that the way we're doing things right now is better, right? Like we're assuming that the Enlightenment and that all these other things are better, but it might just be that the goals of the people in the Middle Ages were just different than ours, right?
Yeah, like why is it better to sign your name on a piece of art? Why is it better that artists sign their name in the corner of a work of art? Now, oh, because it's my expression, it's my identity, it's who I am, and my mom needs to know that I did it. Like, really? Like, why not erase yourself and just make something for the community that's beautiful? So this one bucket of the Renaissance, like Petrarch in particular thought that medieval literature was garbage. He thought medieval art was garbage. And so he was going to rescue the world by going back to the real story of ancient Greece and Rome. The second one is the Reformation. And we can't get away from this, that the Protestant reformers say the Catholic Church lost everything from the period of 500 to 1500. Christianity went off the rails. We need to go back to the true early church, the church fathers, the time of the New Testament, and that will restore us to the real way. And so the Christianity of the Middle Ages is like the monk in the monks beating themselves with pieces of wood, is kind of a dark ages of religion. And then you pointed out the other key one, which is the Enlightenment. And our founding fathers loved this myth of ancient Greece and Rome. They were educated. If you and I wanted to apply to Harvard in 17, well, you couldn't apply because you're a woman. So much for modernity's Enlightenment. But if we wanted to apply to Harvard, we need to prove that we had good Latin and Greek. We'd need to, most of the education that the founders did at Harvard and Princeton, all these places, was Latin, Greek, and theology. That was it. And so they worshipped these classical models. I think it was John Adams who talked about standing up in front of the room and having his Latin instructor like beat him when he didn't recite his Latin correctly.
Which sounds sort of medieval.
Yes.
It sounds sort of medieval.
And that's the key to this whole thing, right? Whether it's the Renaissance people or the Reformation people or the Enlightenment people, they need to believe in two myths at once. The myth that the Middle Ages is dark and savage, and the myth that the modern world has got it all figured out. What would be some good examples you think from the movie of
Well, the one that gets me, and the one that, if I'm being totally honest, over the last few years I've been starting to question more, is this whole idea of government and like representative government, and this whole idea of like this assumption that enlightened government is just inherently better. And I'm not for absolute monarchy. I'm not for any of those things. But I also think there was some stability in that, right? So I think about when the king's going around and they're like, who made you king? And he's like, the lady of the lake, clad in shimmering samite, right? It's like, there is that ridiculousness of like when we see something like the divine right to rule and we're like, oh my God, who died and made you king, right? And it's like, God did. But also, there was some stability there and there was some like unity if we all believed the same thing. I listened to a really interesting interview of a woman who was talking about how the Enlightenment was mostly good, but the Enlightenment also robbed us of our ability to like believe and have kind of like faith as a group, right? To all have this unity
Right.
where we all believe in the same thing, which again can be bad in so many ways, but like, I don't know, I feel like living especially in 21st century US, you just see we've gotten so enlightened and so independent that we're like a million different countries in one, you know? So I guess my last question on this is like the myth of the Dark Ages also comes down to like that the people were dark, like they were not enlightened, they couldn't see anything around them. The joke I always make is I'm like, peasants were just digging in the dirt for more dirt, right? It's like when King Arthur comes across those peasants and they're like, oh, there's some lovely filth here, right? And they're like kind of doing nothing. Like that can't be true. I mean, did peasants really not know anything else that was going on in the broader world? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so there's, again, the double myth. So medieval peasants were obviously mostly illiterate. They didn't have access to education and equal rights or anything close to it. A lot of them lived off of subsistence farming, which of course isn't just moving mud from one pile to another. It's actually like quite hard, good work, and takes a lot of intelligence and determination and planning. Let's talk about modern people, or think actually of New York City in the 1880s.
Oh, I've seen Newsies. They were dirty.
Yeah. Or Jacob Riis' How the Other Half Lives. Any of these like these success pools of standing water. Why? I don't mean to be like so negative and such a downer, but it's one of the things about this kind of comedy. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think you could make this kind of comedy today the same way, joking about like murdering women and as witches and like,
yeah,
poor people are gross and religion stupid. Like, I don't think Twitter could abide it.
No, if it was set any time in the last 200 years, it'd be like, whoa. This is the thing I always struggle with as a history teacher, is like, part of it is to make it fun for kids. You got to be like, the Mongols, rah! But then you're like, but the Mongols murdered people, and those people were someone's child. And like, it's really hard to go back and forth. And you bring up a really good point, right? That it's like, you make all these jokes about people in the Middle Ages, but it's like, the statistic I always tell to my kids is, I'm like, people in the United States at the end of the 19th century, they were exposed to, in their entire life, the same amount of information as one of us is exposed to in a day, right? So It's like, in terms of us thinking about, we talk about peasants in the Middle Ages, I think I read somewhere, and you can tell me if this is wrong, that most people really never went further than 5 or 10 miles from the place they were born. Like, most people are just sort of staying on that manor or wherever, and that's all they experience, which is one of the reasons why the Crusades is such this like eye-opening moment when people do go off and see the like amazing civilizations of the Middle East. But it's like, that's actually not that different than, like you say, than we were living not that long ago. And even today, you could argue people still want to be in their own little kind of bubble, right? We might know a lot more, but that doesn't make us better. That doesn't necessarily mean we're doing more. Yeah, it's interesting. All right, I'll stop saying that. I'll stop saying that we're digging in the dirt.
And so this kind of comes to this big closing question for us, is like, when does the Middle Ages end?
Yes.
Well, officially with the Renaissance and the Reformation and the discovery of the New World. But if you were a peasant in the countryside of England, that didn't, who cares about the Reformation? A lot of the countryside stayed Catholic. A lot of the countryside didn't really interact with this really great art, and it didn't discover any new world. Mm-hmm. So the Middle Ages for the peasantry ends probably around 1800.
Yeah, industrialization.
Definitions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even industrialization penetrates into Europe later. So it's a lot of interesting questions. And the thing is, if you don't know a lot about the Middle Ages, don't worry about that. You're probably not going to be able to fill that 1,000 years in with all kinds of great stuff. Just watch Monty Python, have a great time.
Sure.
But if you do know some stuff about modernity, use that as your measure of whether you think we've arrived. Are we happy with what we've done? You look around at what freedom has given us and individualism has given us. Like, I love some of this stuff, but man, there's other stuff that feels like it's missing.
Mm-hmm. I think we all need to go outside and just dig in the dirt for more dirt. Wow, that's the end of part 1. That's like our big philosophical start. In part 2, we are going to be talking about the thing I love to talk about, and you're probably going to just make me feel terrible about it, which is medieval justice. Torture, the Inquisition, witch hunts, all that fun stuff. So, next time.